Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller, and welcome as always to our viewers on onespotmedia.com. Joining us in studio for this program, we have Executive Director at the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, Jeanette Calder, Attorney at Law and co-host of Power 106 FM's Morning Agenda, Daniel Archer, and Member of Parliament of Central Kingston, the Reverend Ronald Thwaites. Just before we go to them, though, let's go to this overview by Janella Pursues.
The Office of the Contractor General was seen as a powerful advocate in the fight against corruption. Former office holders like Greg Christie issued stinging criticisms of government actions and officials. In 2018, the Contractor General's office was subsumed under the new Integrity Commission. The Contractor General became Director of Corruption Prosecution. Former Contractor General Dirk Harrison occupies the post. The Commission last week released a report done by Mr. Harrison as the former Contractor General. In it, he outlined the findings of a probe into the 2016 sale of the rooms on the Beach Hotel. The gist of the report is that the Urban Development Corporation, UDC, the seller, could not negotiate freely and from a position of strength because Cabinet Minister Darrell Vaz and other state agencies meddled. The report claims that the property was valued at $13.5 million and the beach lands $3.7 million. Both were sold for US $7.2 million and $10 million. Using the $125 exchange rate, that is 1.2 billion Jamaican dollars. Mr. Vaz denied the claim made in the report, calling the findings false, disingenuous, and without evidence.
We weighed all the variables and the pros and cons, and I believe and support unequivocally the decision made by the UDC board, the ministry, for which I'm a part of, Economic Growth and Job Creation, and then Cabinet.
The Integrity Commission questioned some of the findings and initially withheld the report, asking Mr. Harrison to review his findings. It stated that the validity of some of the conclusions in the initial report was, quote, doubtful and could be open to serious questioning if read by an objective person, unquote. The commissioners also decided to allow those adversely implicated in the report to respond and sent those responses to Parliament along with the report. These actions of the brand new commission has raised eyebrows. The bill establishing the commission was passed in the lower house on January 31, 2017. For Prime Minister Andrew Holness, corruption or perception of corruption was at the heart of the move.
The effect of this consolidation is that there will be, Mr. Speaker, one compliance mechanism for parliamentarians, public officers, and members of the public who carry out public functions.
Based on the Prime Minister's explanation, the Integrity Commission is supposed to enhance the OCG's work.
This is an important shift in the anti-corruption ecosystem of Jamaica, to give prosecutorial powers to the anti-corruption agency.
The opposition generally supported the bill.
I think this is probably the most path-breaking element in this legislation, which caused much debate, certainly in the cabinet led by the Most Honourable Portia Simpson Miller. The introduction of that position of the Director of Corruption Prosecutions, because it provides for an independent prosecutor acting on the basis of their own judgment and assessment of the investigations that are completed.
But following the Room's report, the opposition wants Mr. Vaz to step aside and the Integrity Commission reviewed.
The composition of the commission needs to be reviewed. In fact, the very provisions of the Act call for a review to be done within 5 years. We think, given this circumstance, it is very appropriate that such an audit be done, that such a review be done now.
At this point, the government doesn't appear to be of a similar view.
Okay, well, let's dig into the discussion there, and let's start perhaps with that issue of the Integrity Commission's report. Jeanette Calder, let me ask you, well, the Integrity Commission statement, I should say, on the report, has this undermined the report that came from the former Contractor General?
Diana, I can tell you how I responded to it when I was reading it. Having read the statement from the Integrity Commission, I have to confess that, usually I would have just read it with some degree of objectivity and drawing on my expertise in this area. But I kept thinking during the course of reading the report, I wonder what was the problem here? I wonder if this is the section. So to the extent that it was actually pressing in on my mind and weighing on me, another element and another layer of investigative look at it, I would say that undermine is a strong word, but it was challenging for me, knowing that the Integrity Commission had already signaled some amount of dissatisfaction. However, I think when we look really at the press release, what it seemed to be is that initially, when Mr. Harrison submitted his report, they had a difficulty. It doesn't mean that the final that he sent to them, there was a problem, but certainly it created a bit of a difficulty, which I think was unfortunate. Yeah.
What do you think, Daniel?
I use the word challenge. I think it challenges the report and the authenticity of it. I think undermining, unfortunately, is too light a word to use, because I think when you're looking at the integrity commissioners, you are expecting that there's going to be some uniformity of thought, that they're going to consider together. This is the report.
And they did. They said it was unanimous.
It's a unanimous decision. This is what we're going to be doing. We're challenging the interference of the minister. We've seen some things that raise questions. For me, it begs the question, are we and have we gotten to that point where the commission itself is now politically vested? That's the questions I start to ask. Because I'm looking at commissioners who, for all intents and purposes, are to be independent. I don't know if I'm affected by the fact that I would want to use a Jamaican adage, you're washing your dirty linen in public. Mm-hmm. But for me, the gravamen, the substance of the report was truly affected by their comments.
But you do have, though, on the one hand, you have Dirk Harrison, former senior prosecutor with extensive experience in corruption matters, former attorney general. And on the other hand, now you have the commissioners of the Integrity Commission, who are themselves also highly regarded, former justices, the auditor general, and so on. So what does that leave you with then? Because you said, for one, it asks you ask the question, is there some political issue going on there? But is not also a reasonable question, is it that they saw something in the former Contractor General's work that they thought objectionable? I mean, looking at their words, the validity of certain of the substantive conclusions was doubtful, could be open to serious questioning.
What was objectionable about what he found? What was objectionable about it?
Well, they don't tell us.
That's the point. So Janet is right. When you read it, you go through it and you go, I wonder if this is this objectionable? He's raising questions. And for me, appreciating what the Contractor General is to do and ought to do in terms of looking at the substance of corruption or whether there's a transparency in it. What does it do in terms of the agreement? For me, I have to challenge that. And I cast no aspersions on their reputations. They are well-vested persons and they are so respected. But the commission itself now begs the question that you have a framework, but is it that they're afraid of the government itself, or is it that they have bought into the argument that there are certain things that you have to sacrifice for the benefit of others? For me, that's the assessment.
Reverend Thwaites, I know the opposition has expressed concern as well.
Well, it's very confusing. What is the public to believe? Believe Mr. Harrison, a highly regarded investigator and a person in his capacity, or the Integrity Commission? And when the Integrity Commission speaks about him making conclusions that are objectively questionable, I would like to be part of that objectivity. Please show me what it was. Let the public decide. As it is now, we are confused.
So you think they needed to go beyond this statement?
Yes. I want to see everything, just like Mr. Muller in Congress.
That's what Jeanette had mentioned before.
No reduction.
When you look at the questions, which is a question that many persons have asked, have you reviewed the evidence that he looked at? What did you look at to say that you didn't have this information? What's the timeline? Because when you come to a conclusion, we have to have an appreciation of what you examined. And I'm not sure if we are confident or comfortable that you've adequately examined this information to come to this conclusion.
I know one of the concerns that has been expressed is the fact that the Commission decided to make the report available then to the persons who what they said, the affected parties, they said needed to see the entire report for them to discern the context. They then allowed them to make responses and appended those responses to the report. And I know there's been concern raised about that. Let me ask Reverend Thwaites as well, because I know the opposition has also raised concerns against the background of the fact that these persons had been interviewed by the Contractor General. Yeah. He lists them in his report, the various persons who were interviewed, and their responses are included in the report.
I respectfully agree with his analysis that they were given a second bite of the cherry. Were there anything wanting in his original inquiry, statement taking of these persons, then undoubtedly natural justice alone would require that they be given a chance to be fully expressive. But where they have been given fulsome opportunity to express themselves and to state their position, why are you going back to them again? What is your motive for doing that? And how extensive will that right be in every investigation of corruption or in any criminal instance going forward?
We're going to pick up on that when we come back. We go for our first break. You're watching All Angles. Soon come.